Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new video, and today we're going to be talking about the Hispanic shift that occurred in the 2020 election, whether it's poised to continue in the 2022 midterms and the 2024 presidential election. But first, please like this video, please subscribe to the channel if you're not already, trying to hit 5K by the end of June. The growth that we've seen over these past few weeks has been really incredible, and I really, I truly uh, appreciate it. But with that being said, we should get started taking a look at this very cool precinct map that I'm not going to have open for too much of this video because it makes my computer very laggy for obvious reasons of how detailed it is. But, it does not lie. It is an extremely detailed map of the 2020 election. But this is a 2016 swing map, or a swing map, a swing map. I don't know why I decided not to talk there. A swing map of the a map of the swing between the 2016 and 2020 presidential elections. So, as you can see, there's a lot of blue on this map. California, if we zoom out, most of these counties are blue. There are a lot of red ones, and you can just see, southern Texas sticking out as red. But I'm going to zoom in on Texas in a second. We should start off with Florida. So, just some background. Hispanics in a lot of regions. Now, just a common misconception that we should really just start out this video with. I know this video seems a little disorganized, which is probably true because I haven't outlined it, but we should just address a few things. First of all, Hispanics, not all Hispanics did shift to the right. In fact, in a lot of states, like, in a state like California, in states like California, Hispanics actually did shift to the left. Biden performed better with Hispanics in California than Hillary Clinton did. But in swing states like Florida and Texas, states that Biden was expected to perform better than he actually did perform, he did poorly with Hispanics. So that's why it kind of gets the attention that it gets. Now, taking a look at Florida, which I just mentioned, look at all this red on this map. There's a tiny bit of blue here, but these precincts shifted hugely to the right. Even urban precincts shifted hugely to the right, mostly because Cubans came out for Trump and because Hispanics in general shifted far to the right. Now, I kind of saw the swing coming. Now, to the degree that it happened, I'm not sure I want to say that, but it still was a decently predictable trend. And this is, again, because of the fact that, when we talk about trends that have been happening over these elections, these trends are they're very consistent. And the trend that I'm going to bring up here is that incumbents do better with Hispanics. Now, I repeat this so much in my videos that I have it memorized. So, in 2000, I believe George W. Bush won 36% of the Hispanic vote. In 2004, he improved to 44%. 2008, Obama wins 67% of the Hispanic vote. 2012, he wins 70%. In 2016, Donald Trump wins 28% of the Hispanic vote nationwide. Then 2020, he does better. He wins 32% of the Hispanic vote nationwide. So Hispanics are still trending towards the Democratic Party. 2 years ago, George W. Bush had he wins 36% of the Hispanic vote in a performance that was praised. Donald Trump only won 32% of the Hispanic vote. So when people say that, in 20 years, Hispanics are going to be a solidly Republican voting bloc, I cringe at that because you're extrapolating a data or a set of data from one election, and not even in all regions. This wasn't even a nationwide thing. This was a swing in a couple of important states that have kind of created this whole misconception that Hispanics are somehow trending to the right. Now, I'm not going to say they're trending to the left, and we'll talk about it in this video, but just wanted to get that out of the way. Now, second, I think that it's worth noting that Donald Trump is a very unique candidate. Now, the GOP, could they run another Donald Trump? Yeah. Is it likely that they're going to run someone who embodies Trump and campaigns like him? Probably not. Now, when we talk about Trump, Trump likes to label his opponents. He likes to kind of, he has a lot of nicknames for his opponents. He is a very interesting campaigner. In 2016, he was able to successfully brand Hillary Clinton as a corporatist who did not care but working people. And that's what won him the Rust Belt. Donald Trump didn't flip New Mexico or Nevada in 2016. He won the election because he appealed to working-class voters in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. In 2020, he didn't really try that on Biden. He didn't, he did not call Biden a corporatist, but his main attack on Biden was that he was a socialist. And the socialism label has had mixed results for the GOP, but really, uh, it helped Trump most in Florida, and it helped congressional Republican candidates too. In fact, Donna Shalala, who was a congressional Democrat who lost her 2020 re-election bid in really surprising fashion, she was expected to win by 10 to 12 points by a lot of people, including myself. I had her seat as a likely Democratic seat. She lost her seat because her opponent branded her as a socialist. Debbie Mercosur Powell, who was another progressive Democrat. Well, Shalala was pretty moderate, but Powell was more progressive Democrat. She still was branded as a socialist by her opponent Carlos Jimenez, and he flipped the seat. So we're seeing a pattern with Republicans branding Democrats as socialists, and it really worked for them in Florida. And this is mostly because, as I've mentioned in previous videos, Hispanics in southern Florida, a lot of them are Cuban because, let's talk about geography for a second. You go to southern Florida, like whether it be Miami-Dade County or Monroe County or the Florida Keys, Cuba's right here. You can, take a boat from Cuba to Florida. So it would make sense that a lot of Cubans, when they immigrate to the United States, they're not going to North Dakota. They're going to southern Florida, and they're voting, and they're turning out in this election. They turned out for Donald Trump. Now, we should take a look at kind of inside the minds of Hispanic voters in 2016, as well as 2020, to just take a look at these exit polls. So, first of all, just going to demographic, let's see, race. Hispanics made up 13% of the electorate in 2020, and like I said, 32% of them backed Donald Trump, 65% backed Joe Biden. Now, in 2020, taking a look at race exit polls, Hispanics made up 11% of the electorate, and 28% backed Donald Trump in 2016. So again, Trump had an improvement, but it actually didn't really end up helping him because Hispanics actually made up a greater share of the electorate in 2020 than 2016. Now, when we talk about Hispanics, what were they voting on? I mentioned the socialism issue, but we should really start to look at, an issue that really kind of that helped Donald Trump brand the Democratic Party as the party of communism. So first of all, the Black Lives Matter movement is a movement that really was, in my opinion, I think it was the second most important issue in the 2020 election. Again, it's not to dismiss to dismiss or downplay the seriousness of the issue. I'm not saying it wasn't important. It certainly was important. I just think that, when we look at exit polls, more voters voted on COVID than the Black Lives Matter movement. But again, still a very, very key topic in today's politics. Now, the Black Lives Matter movement was a movement that really energized a lot of voters, and for most people, I think in common knowledge, it helped the Democratic Party, which I think is true. But contrary to popular belief, I do not think that this movement helped the Democratic Party in Florida. In fact, I personally know people in Hispanics who were not even Hispanics, just a lot of people who were turned off by the Black Lives Matter protests. And again, this is a touchy subject for a lot of people, but there were a lot of these protests that ended up being violent. Now, not all of them. In fact, the vast majority of these protests were very, very peaceful. But when the media shows one clip of violence associated with the Black Lives Matter movement, that turned off a lot of voters. And the Black Lives Matter movement, as most of us know, is more associated with the Democratic Party. So when we take a look at the amount of Hispanics that supported the Black Lives Matter movement on November 3rd, 2020, let's see, November 3rd, right here. If we can find November 3rd. Oh, they don't have it. So on November 2nd, the day before the election, 63% of Hispanics supported the movement, 24% opposed of it. That's a pretty big gap. So the vast majority of Hispanics did support the movement. Now, if we kind of take a look at the state that we're dealing with right here, and I think we should really do this because I think it's going to be vastly different than, in California, Hispanics thinking of the Black Lives Matter movement. 62% of them supported it. Only 23% opposed. Now, if we go to Florida, I think it could be different. In fact, it was much, much closer. In Florida, 39% of Floridians supported the Black Lives Matter, or 39% of Floridian Hispanics opposed the Black Lives Matter movement compared to half who supported it. And again, we do know that these polls usually oversample more liberal voters. So I think it's safe to say that this poll is probably, if anything, undersampling voters who oppose the Black Lives Matter movement. Just to put that out there. So again, when we see this figure like, oh, 2/3 of Hispanics support the Black Lives Matter movement, in Florida, it's less than half. Just thought I would say that. Now, when we take a look at our next issue that I talked about, which political party do you think is more concerned with the needs of people like you? This is a really loaded question. I think that, like if you ask this to a white person, it really depends on how they are politically. A more conservative white person might think that the Republican Party is going to be more receptive to them because the Republican Party has traditionally, its establishment has opposed a lot of these movements that are aimed towards Black Lives Matter. And again, I'm not saying that white voters dislike Black Lives Matter. In fact, I think it's the opposite. But there were a lot of white voters who felt threatened by it. Now, on the other hand, there are a lot of more liberal voters who were white who might have kind of thought, well, white people have had a history of not being disadvantaged in this country. Maybe I'm just saying it's a very strange question. Now, when we take a look at Hispanics in Florida, and again, I'm using Florida just kind of as this, kind of as this, I guess, our sample, because Florida was basically the main part where the Hispanic swing towards Trump happened. Taking a look at which party is more concerned with people like you, Hispanics chose Democrats overwhelmingly. It wasn't even close. 62% of Hispanics said Democrats were more concerned with people like you. Only 18% said Republicans, and a similar amount said neither. Now, if we go over down here to state, if it wants to show state, it doesn't. We don't have data for state, but overall, Hispanics did say the Democrats cared more about that. Now, this is interesting. This is significant because we saw this where, in fact, this is a very anecdotal piece of evidence, but I've seen interviews with black voters who have said I'm conservative, but I feel that the Democratic Party cares more of me, therefore I'm going to vote for the Democratic Party. Again, highly anecdotal, but this is the case with a lot of people. So I think that this helped Hispanics with Democrats, and I think that, Trump's language, especially in 2016, could have hurt him when he said, he made a lot of generalizations that people really seem to feel very... people didn't like them, and a lot of Hispanics didn't like them. I'm not saying that all Hispanics didn't like them, I'm just saying that a lot of them did not like them. Now, going over to, you have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of the Republican Party, taking a look at just the nationwide, this is, to be honest, I'm not sure how I feel about it, mostly because of how weird this question is. In fact, you could ask voters, you have a favorable opinion of the Democratic Party, thing I have right here. Actually, I don't have time with the Republican Party, but it would probably be that the majority of Americans view the Democratic Party favorably, although, to be fair, by probably a less amount, or a smaller amount. Now, taking a look at if we can find Hispanic voters, what they thought of the Republican Party. The Republican Party not popular with Hispanics. So, in fact, there were more I think 30% of Hispanics are registered Republicans. Only 15% view the Republican Party favorably. So I think that we could see Hispanics. In 2020 they shifted Republican, even if they didn't like both parties. Now, this is a key issue: citizen for immigrants. Now, the question here was, should the United States deport immigrants living here illegally or offer them a path to citizenship? Again, this question is very, very strange. I think this is kind of offer them a path to citizenship is a bad way of phrasing it. I would have rather them said, should we just deport them or no? And I don't think that the majority of people would have said deport, but I think this question is a little biased, if I'm being completely honest. Now, taking a look at Hispanics, they overwhelmingly backed a path to citizenship. Again, this question is not great, but they still overwhelmingly backed a path to citizenship. And Donald Trump, he softened on his immigration rhetoric in 2020. And I think that's because Donald Trump in 2020, he made more of an effort to reach out to minorities, Hispanics, black voters. And when in 2016, he really didn't. He made an effort to reach out to white working class voters in the Rust Belt, not Hispanics in Florida. which is why he did better in Florida in 2020 than 2016. Now, this next question is, do you have, here we go, the favorable or unfavorable opinion of the Democratic Party? I was correct in my prediction. More than half of Americans view the Democratic Party unfavorably, but it's a little better than Republicans. Now, Hispanics, they view the Democratic Party 58% favorably, 34% unfavorably. So Hispanics, again, much more Democratic than the average citizen. But it's worth noting that this is actually getting better for Democrats as time has gone on. In fact, when we take a look at this, at one point, there was a point, 2017, the middle of 2017, where less than half of Hispanics viewed the party favorably. That was not great for Democrats. That was not a great point for Democrats in time. Now, going over here, it's getting a little better for the Democratic Party. Now, when we go over to do you approve or disapprove of the way Joe Biden is handling his job as president, today, around 47% of Americans approve, 47% disapprove, and, we can see little bumps here. There was a bump over here. I don't know why. There was a bump after he signed the American Rescue Plan, basically the $1,400 COVID relief checks, and there was a kind of a brief honeymoon for a month where he was first inaugurated. But taking a look at Hispanics, 62% of Hispanics approve, and this is important. Okay, so you see the numbers on your screen here. If Joe Biden won, or actually, we can just take a look at the amount of Hispanics that he lost. 32% of Hispanics voted against Joe Biden in the 2020 election. Only 30% disapprove. This is just a poll that they could always be sampling errors, but more Hispanics voted against Joe Biden than disapproved of him. And this is what I'm getting at here, right? If Hispanics in southern Florida, just to extrapolate some data, which again isn't great, but just to use it as an example, if Hispanics in southern Florida voted against Joe Biden because they thought he was a socialist, because Trump branded him as a socialist, and he did, and in their eyes he did govern as a socialist, that's where the Democratic Party can make gains in 2022 and 2024 with Hispanics in areas like southern Florida. It's not only southern Florida where Hispanics are could be turned off by the socialism label. It's other places too. But if Democrats find a way to, and they haven't yet, by the way, but if Democrats find a way to deflect the socialism attacks successfully in places like southern Florida, they can start winning there again. The reason the Democrats haven't won a statewide race in Florida, they haven't won a Senate race there since 2012. They haven't won the presidential election there since 2012. They haven't won the governorship, I think, in over 20 years. If they find a way to stop the socialism label from being used effectively against them, they can start winning places like Florida again. So I think this is the big thing. This is the biggest thing that we're going to take a look at. Now we're going to go over, so we looked at some civics polls, just a few graphs, I guess we're going to say. So first of all, in a 2013 study, 55% of Hispanics were Catholic, 22% were Protestant, and 18% were unaffiliated. So basically, the vast majority of Hispanics are Christian. Christian voters, according to these handy exit polls I have right here, Christian voters backed Donald Trump, 76-24. Three out of every four voters who are Christian voted for Donald Trump. That is huge. These voters were among Donald Trump's most solid voting blocks, right? And then we see over here, Hispanics are very Christian. That's interesting. Now, Hispanics, like I said, they're probably the biggest religious demographic or Christian demographic that doesn't back the Republican Party. But the Republican Party in recent years has started to, kind of catch on to this. Because, again, in the past, Republicans didn't even try to appeal to Hispanics. The reason that Bush did, so well compared to Trump with Hispanics was because he was popular in a state like Texas, where there were a lot of Hispanic voters that came out for him that voted Democrat down ballot. But I think now the Republican Party is starting to catch on to this, and they're, saying, look, three out of every four Christian voters back us. We should start making inroads with Christian Hispanics. Now, going over to a few graphs I have here, Hispanics are still registered Democrats in overwhelming numbers. In fact, like I said, 2/3 of Hispanics identify with the Democratic Party. And just taking a look at their partisan lean by group, when we look at in terms of their status, I guess, when they were born, where they were born, they still back Democrats, nearly every demographic. In fact, the demographic that comes closest to leaning Republican are, English-dominant male Hispanics. But instead, these Hispanics are voting Democrat. And, again, they're still, their best demographic according to this chart was only 30%. So, again, like I said, if the Democrats can continue or not continue because they haven't been doing it. But if they can start to deflect the socialism label, they can start winning Hispanics in Southern Florida again. Now, on the flip side, if Republicans can continue making inroads with these, and saying, making a point about socialism, making a point about being the favorite of Christian voters, then they can continue the success that they've enjoyed in Florida over the past few years. Now, for my prediction for Hispanics in the future, it's really going to be hard to see. But for those of you who came here and watched, sat through this whole 20 minutes of analysis, which is a lot, I want to say, I think in 2022, Hispanics are going to back Democrats by a little more than they did in 2020, mostly because of the incumbent swing factor, which is really all you need to know. But whether Hispanics are going to trend red or not in an election, Hispanics like to vote for the incumbent more. And in 2024, should Biden or Harris, I think Hispanics will back Democrats more in 2024 than 2020. And again, it's debatable whether Trump was a good candidate, and I say good in quotations for Hispanics. But I think it's very hard for the GOP to recreate the rhetoric that he used. So with that being said, I'm going to wrap up this video here. So if you enjoyed, please like the video, subscribe if you haven't already. With that, see you all next one. Goodbye.